topic before lunch. Should I use this one? Okay. Yeah. So I will go into more details regarding soft plastic lures as a potential source of aquatic pollution. So to give you some background, soft plastic lures are among the most common artificial lures actually used in recreational angling, and we did a study in Germany asking people how common is, how commonly they use soft plastics for fishing, and over 80% of the Germans are regularly using soft plastic lures. Of course, depending on the fishery, quite a substantial amount of these soft plastic lures can get lost. For example, when the hook gets tangled somewhere and the line breaks. And we calculated that around 0.8 soft plastic lures per angling days are lost per angler. So you see here in the figure, there are many, or a high proportion of anglers is losing quite a few per year, but there are also very avid anglers that use up to more than 100 soft plastics per year. So of course these lost soft plastic lures can have various impacts on the aquatic ecosystem. For example, they can be ingested by fish, and they also contribute to micro and macroplastic pollution. But there's actually relatively little knowledge about the potential of soft plastics to leach certain chemicals out in the water, for example, phthalates or other persistent additives. And there's also actually little knowledge about the risk awareness of anglers regarding these potential issues for the environment and also for human health. And in addition, there's no to little regulatory measures for the industry enforced. At least in Europe, it's really there's not much regulation enforced, so they can actually put everything inside the lures what they want. So we actually combined in our study chemical and bioanalytical analysis with a questionnaire study. And first we wanted to evaluate anglers' perceptions regarding environmental and health risk of soft plastic lures. Then we wanted to identify and quantify phthalates and persistent mobile and toxic plastic additives leaching from soft plastics. And then in the end, we also wanted to assess soft plastics for estrogenicity. So if there's any hormone effect out of these lures. And for these first questions, we did a questionnaire study. So we recruited participants from a German-wide angler telephone diary survey. And we sent them a questionnaire by mail. So 191 anglers got this questionnaire. And they had different kind of questions in it, but they also assessed the perceived risks of soft plastics for human health and the environment. And we got a quite high response rate of about 95%. So this is one of the questions, and they got statements for example, stating manufacturers should pay more attention to the ingredients of soft plastics and stuff like that. And brownish colors mean they disagree to these statements, and greenish colors mean they agree. So it was a Likert scale from 1 to 5. And we actually found 5 clusters. So the first cluster, which ranked highest, so there was the most agreement among anglers regarding these statements, and most of these statements were about regulatory measures. So for example, there should be legal restrictions for the ingredients of soft plastics lures, or there should be a labeling, for example, that people know. I will not show you the brands and the models, but maybe you see one or find one that you are also using. And I will not connect the results to the lures, so you will not see it. But you can check in the paper if you want. So for this experiment, we cutted the soft plastics in smaller pieces, placed them in purified waters, and then we had tried to simulate more or less environmental conditions, but this was of course a lab study, so they were shaked and stored in water at room temperature, and they got also a daylight light for 14 hours per day. And then we collected water samples at different points of time to track the chemical release over time. So if there's any change over time. And then we analyzed the samples using high-performance liquid chromatography coupled to a mass spectrometry to search for certain phthalates and other additional plastic additives. And we had a library of 6 phthalates that we could track with the method, and also 124 additional plastic additives that could be traced with the method. For the bioanalytical assessment for estrogenicity, we used a bioassay. So we selected out of these 16 soft plastics randomly 10, and we were using a luciferase reporter gene assay. So you took some human T47D key blue cells with estrogen receptors, and then we exposed them to the lure extracts, to controls, and to estradiol as a positive control. So we looked at the cells were reacting to the estradiol. And after 16 hours, we measured luminescence to quantify estrogen-like effects. So showing you some results, 10 out of the 16 analyzed soft plastics leached the targeted phthalates, so quite the majority of them. And the concentrations were on a medium level, so they range from 10 nanogram per gram sample to 1,000 nanogram per gram sample. And we found different phthalates. So the most common were DEP, followed by BBP and DMP and DnBP. And the phthalates actually leached constantly over the 61 days we observed the lures. And the main or the most common phthalates we found are known to be endocrine disruptors, linked to reproductive toxicity, and also they may cause ecological issues in the environment. In addition, we found 54 persistent mobile and toxic plastic additives. The most important ones were 1,4-dioxane and MBN, which is the azo-based radical initiator, and those are widely used actually in plastic production. And both, again, raise environmental and health concern due to chronic toxicity, carcinogenicity, and potential endocrine disrupting effects. So those are not good substances, I would say. Interestingly, only one of the lures was active in the bioassay, so there was some, we found some endocrine disruptive potential in one of the lures. But interestingly, the phthalates and also the PMT levels were pretty low, so it seems like there was a substance inside the lure that we could not track with our method. So there may be an additive that was not covered by the method. But you see it was quite high, so there was quite some effect of this lure. So to conclude, soft plastics are one of the most common lures that are used by anglers, and they are regularly lost. Anglers are actually concerned about negative effects of soft plastic, in particular on the aquatic ecosystems, and they actually ask for regulatory measures and more transparency, in particular from the producers. They have less concern regarding effects on their own health. That was actually interesting to see. But we found that the maturity of the soft plastics actually leached phthalates in median levels, and we've also found various other persistent, mobile, and toxic substances that were added to the soft plastic lures. And one soft plastic showed high endocrine disruptive potential. So in the end, lost soft plastic lures, they contribute to environmental pollution, and they may harm also human health. And I think the conclusion out of this study is that we actually need more governance, in particular focusing on the industry and the producers. And of course, there should be also more education for the anglers, showing them that there are substances in the lures that are harmful to the environment and also to the human health, so that they could adjust or maybe try to buy more environmental friendly lures when they are available. Yeah. So that's it. If you are interested in more details of the study, it's already published in Science of the Total Environment, and you can, I'm happy if you want to have a look, you can find it. And otherwise, thank you very much. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask me. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. Yeah, we've got a bit of time for questions. So, any hands? Yes.
Thank you for the very severe issue. I want to know the recognition of the biological degradable plastic soft worm or something in Germany. Would you do? Yeah.
There are actually some alternatives, and we also, I didn't show you all the results of the questionnaire, but we also asked them if they are using this biodegradable or environmental friendly lures. But actually the proportion of anglers that are using them is pretty small, actually. And also the market, I mean, it's a low proportion of products that are claimed as environmental friendly. But as Jürgen showed us, actually, there could be that they claim it, but it's not really true, so you would have to prove it. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for a very cool talk. Just one quick question. Were any of these lures scented, like with some kind of aroma? Because I think that might be one of the next questions to think about.
Yeah. There were actually 2 or 3, I think, ones which were, they had some salt stuff and flavor on it. So yeah, that could be, of course, additional.
There's absolutely toxic substances in many of these lures, and I'm always wondering about dilution effects. So in reality, of course, there's current in lakes and rivers, and how do these dilute, and how would that impact the environmental toxicity?
Yeah, I think that's of course true. So that was laboratory work, and I think the effect would be smaller in reality. But on the other hand, we see that at certain spots there's a very high potential that there are many soft plastic lures lost. So I think that could be an issue if they're on certain spots it's concentrated. Yeah.
Yeah, Thomas asked the dilution question, which I was thinking about, and just sort of that need for sort of lake or water body level modeling. I'm really interested in the pathway of fish again, right? So if these things end up as bezoars or stuck in the guts of fish, which happens with things like lake trout and largemouth bass, for example, does that go into the tissue and then angler consumes it and then it becomes a real human health issue? That feels like the more likely pathway for regulators to care. Thinking out loud.
Yeah, I think that's true. On the other hand, I think these whole effects that may just with handling the lures, and I know some friends from me, they just gave it to babies to play around and they are licking on it and stuff. I mean, this is something, I think you should also be concerned.
Yeah, that's the time for all the questions. But I think just it's not really a question, but I have also noticed that there's increasing amount of artificial baits. So not particularly lures. You know, I'm not going to mention names, but there are specific plastic lures that are definitely out there, and they're becoming more frequent in that you actually fish them passively. So they've got an attractant and fish eat them, but they are definitely plastic derived. It'll be very interesting to do a similar study on those, because even though we know fish do take bites out of these lures when they're lost, etc., the ones that are meant for fish to ingest, how does how is that potentially going to create issues for people eating those fish? So yeah, very cool study. So next up.